All right. First rule of this channel, we not talk about this channel. Second rule of this channel, this is not legal advice. So this is going to be the 2024 fantasy football offseason preview for the Kansas City Chiefs, the defending Super Bowl champions. One of the things that I would get into first is that ESPN yesterday released their cheat sheet. I think this thing's pretty nifty. If you're into that type of thing, I have one of my co-managers that doesn't put out any effort for fantasy football until like 30 seconds before the draft. What this does is it allows me to like mark it up, like Cooper Cup last year with the hamstring injury. I just like taking him off my board. So it's really easy for me. I used to make my own rankings with this stuff. He kind of likes this because it's cleaner. That's why I use it, and because I can mark it up. So if you're into that type of thing, it is there for you. And we will start using some of the other rankings. I was waiting on this so I could kind of write on it to show some stuff. So that's how I build my rankings for myself, is looking at the values across different leagues and trying to build a consensus towards who to attack and who I might have to actually overvalue, because in other leagues, certain other people may know who these guys are at a different price than I thought I was going to be able to pay for them, if that makes any sense. So anyway, moving on to Chiefs last year, they were 6th in passing, 19th in rushing, 15th in points. The biggest thing with the Chiefs, I would say, is some of the teams that we thought were going to be good are going to be bad, and some teams that we thought were going to be bad are going to be good. And when it comes to the Chiefs, like, they were a team that we thought were going to be like elite, and they were just okay. Some of the stuff we could have predicted was the wide receiver room was going to be a little bit lacking. That's generally what occurred. And this year they did upgrade it. We'll talk a little bit about like how much that helped them. Their draft class, Xavier Worthy, the fastest man who ever existed, 4.21 in the 40 at the combine, goes 28th overall to the Chiefs. What I think this does between him and the free agent pickup of Hollywood Brown is it creates this verticality in the offense that's really going to open it up. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about Rashid Rice when we get there, but I do really like the selection, potentially to turn into like a Tyreek Hill down the line. Second round draft pick, Kingsley Sama, whatever, offensive tackle from BYU. I like anything that's going to keep Patrick Mahomes upright, and it's going to keep Isaiah Pacheco running downhill. Fourth round draft pick, Jared Wiley, tight end out of TCU. Real interesting pick, probably more so from Dynasty. May have some implications on Travis Kelce this year. And then finally, CJ Hansen, offensive guard, Holy Cross, don't know anything about him, other than the fact that he plays offensive line, and I like offensive linemen. Patrick Mahomes, I have him as your quarterback 4. He is going 3 on Fantasy Pros, 32 overall. On ESPN, and we can start looking at some of these things, he is going at quarterback 4, pick 45 overall. I think that he is overvalued because of the fact that I have your Dak Prescott's and Joe Burrow in the same tier of like guys who have sub elite ranges of outcomes, because they're going to lack the nimbly bimbly. And that's how I would break it down. Like, I do think that Patrick Mahomes has quarterback 1 in his range of outcomes, but generally speaking, if I put the over underline on Patrick Mahomes at like 4,500 yards passing this year and 35 touchdowns, which is about where I would put it, and then 350 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns, expecting that we're going to get that positive regression in the rushing game this year. What it does, and I can pull this one up, is it puts him in this tier with Dak Prescott last year, 4,500 yards, 36 touchdowns, to go along with 242, 2 touchdowns. So if I want that Patrick Mahomes production, I could go find Dak Prescott, pull the trigger on that, and it's going to give me roughly the same chance to get the same outcome. Now, yes, do I think that Patrick Mahomes has a better chance to finish at quarterback 1? Yes, but across the league, scoring is going to be down. So figuring out a way to go like Patrick Mahomes is going to throw for 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns is going to be a little bit more difficult, especially because if I think that Patrick Mahomes has the ability to do that, I also think Joe Burrow has the ability to do that. He's going to cost me pick 61. And then on Fantasy Pros, he's going to go like right in line with Dak, pick 61. So if I want that elite level guy or a premium type quarterback, I'm going to wait like 30 picks or 15 picks, depending on my league. And I'm probably going to pull the trigger on Joe Burrow at cost, more so than either go up and get Patrick Mahomes or let him fall to me in this range of about like 30. That's how I would deal with it. Now, The backup, peace of mind, Carson Wentz, like that could go either way. A little bit of a gunslinger, which we like from a fantasy perspective. A little bit of a hero ball type of guy, which we don't like from a fantasy perspective. So hopefully it never comes to that when it comes down to those things. So again, the over underline with Patrick Mahomes is going to be at 4,500 yards, like 35 touchdowns to go along with 350 and 3 touchdowns. I do think, again, sometimes playing it safe is the right strategy in fantasy football. Hey, I understand why you would pull the trigger on him. Still going to have a quarterback 8 in his range of outcomes. That's what he had last year. I think that he's going to have that positive regression. Part of that's going to be because they said this wide receiver room is so bad. Let's go out and sign Hollywood Brown and draft Xavier Worthy. Moving on to the running back room, I have Isaiah Pacheco 5. I moved him up from 6, moved Jonathan Taylor down. The biggest reason behind this is they didn't re-sign Jerick McKinnon. They re-signed Clyde to be the backup. Maybe we're going to have a little bit of competition from Michael Pirine. The guy that I'd be most worried about hearing in camp would be Deneric Prince. He was a camp hype guy last year. He spent most of the year on the practice squad. 6 foot, 216, 4'4", 140. This would be the guy that I'd be worried about this turning into some type of timeshare. If it's Clyde and McKinnon, if it's Clyde or Pirine, what I'd be most worried about is one of these guys taking over the passing down back work. The not necessarily going to be design passing. It's going to be the opportunity for checkdowns on third down, because these guys would be the guys that would come in and pass block. That's what I'd be most worried about as I clear this out. With Pacheco, hopefully I can hunt him down. What I'm thinking with Pacheco this year is, with McKinnon being gone, it's going to open up his ability to score maybe a little bit more in the red zone, because that's where they would bring McKinnon in the most. Probably regardless of Rashee Rice's legal situation, is not going to be the number one guy in the red zone when it comes from opportunities. He may end up being like number 2 or number 3. The over underline on him, I would guess, is going to be like 1,200 yards rushing, 10 touchdowns. Probably because of the lack of Jared McKinnon, you're looking at having a positive regression in the passing game to like 300, 350. The receiving touchdowns will probably stay pretty consistent. So over underline 2. That's why I would generally move him up this high. There's going to be a limited amount of guys that are bell cows, and getting a poor man's version, somewhat imperfect, is probably something I would be looking at relative to cost. So this is where it gets a little fun. So Fantasy Pros, he's going at about pick 35, which if he falls to me here, I'm really happy. I get running back 11 or running back 5 at 35 prices. This is why we start looking at some of the other rankings. On ESPN, they have him at running back 8, which I think is slightly undervalued, well within his range, but I would not be spending running back 16 prices on Isaiah Pacheco. There would be other guys in this range that I would be more interested in. Your Garrett Wilsons, who I think have an elite outcome, or looking at some of these other guys, the running backs, I would probably be pulling the trigger on your Rachaad White at pick 25 at this point to have that elite outcome. I don't think there's an elite outcome for Isaiah Pacheco. I think you're buying running back 5 and expecting to get running back 5 at that point. If you're buying running back 11, he's probably got running back 5 as his top end range of outcomes. All right. Moving on to the wide receiver room, elephant in the room, Rashee Rice. Let's get this out of the way. If there is not a plea deal or conviction before the season, I don't think that the NFL is going to suspend him until next year, because that's when I would expect the conviction or the plea deal to take place. So that's how I feel about it. I have him move down to wide receiver 35, and that's because of the Xavier Worthy pick more so than anything else. There's going to be a lot of mouths to feed between him, Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, and we'll get into this a little bit. So with Rashee Rice, he probably is best to play the Z, the movable guy, or the big slot. He probably could at 6'1", 204 play the X. Probably not going to be his best thing. They were using Rashee Rice a little bit more in those big boy, quote unquote, big boy routes by the end of the year. But his biggest thing is going to be like that yak guy, the kind of more design passing plays going to him. That's why at the beginning of the year, I had him at like wide receiver 10, expecting that we could get somewhere between like 120 to maybe 160 targets coming out of him with the age regression of Travis Kelce. Now that they bring in Worthy, we can say the stat line between Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, and Xavier Worthy is for all three of them, just like when we were talking about the other day uh, with the Cardinals, we could say the stat line for all three of these guys and Travis Kelce is going to be about 1,000 yards receiving, 7 touchdowns. That's still going to leave Patrick Mahomes uh, with that 4,500 yards passing, with 500 yards to go to the other wide receivers, the running backs, and the other tight ends, and leave 7 passing touchdowns on the board that can be distributed around those guys too. So these are the top end type of like mid range of outcomes for Rice, Brown, and Worthy. Maybe Worthy has to earn his job like we saw last year with Rice. Maybe that could happen. They also did that with Tyreek Hill back when he was a rookie. Maybe that could happen. The big problem that I see with these three guys, Brown, Worthy, and Rice, is that like Justin Watson and Justin Ross are on the roster. Justin Ross was a pretty good college prospect. He had a neck injury. He got IR'd coming out of college with the Chiefs. Had some legal issues last year when he was earning his way into the lineup a little bit more. These guys are going to be more of your traditional like big X. Now, Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy can play like a speed X. And the difference behind this is that like when you have a big X and you try and bully this guy can bully you back, get up in his face and play press. When you have a speed X and you try and do that to them, the press can knock them off their route. And what happens with this is, yeah, these guys are fast enough that if they get by that press, they're gone. It's a touchdown. But you can really bully them out of the game at that point, depending on like how well they can deal with the press. Xavier Worthy, 5'11", 165, like basically like an average corner could probably pick him up and dump truck him into the sideline. So like that's how I would break this stuff down. We saw this a little bit with like Chris Olave. He really has a hard time with physical coverage. That's why it's better to kind of move these guys around, have them off the line of scrimmage playing the Z, or in the slot, going vertical out of the slot. It limits the amount of snaps that they can get on the field. If this is your 3 wide receiver set, then Rashee Rice is going to be playing a lot of X against press. If they're playing Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy in that X role, they can. If they're playing like off coverage, it's going to limit their ability to go do the things that they do well, which is go vertical. That's why I would suspect that Justin Ross and Justin Watson are not going to go away, because they can give you those X snaps. And this is regardless of whether or not Rashee Rice gets suspended. Now, I don't necessarily think Sky Moore is going to be a thing this year. That's why I have him up. He's second round draft pick 2 years ago. He magically disappeared like he's not good at football. Surprised me. I thought he was going to have a lot of value last year. But the reason why I bring this up is with that Rashee Rice suspension that we're all worried about, regardless of that, I think Justin Watson and Justin Ross are not going to go away in this offense. And you're probably going to look at like a certain amount of split opportunities between the 3 of these guys. The other thing is, and when we get to the tight end room here in a second, who the 2 wide receivers are going to be in the two wide receiver sets, or 2 tight ends, 2 running backs, one of those things. That's going to limit the overall opportunity, and it's going to get really weird to have like a Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy on the field at the same time when you're trying to go big, because they ain't big. I don't think they're going to be run blockers in any way, shape, or form when you have like Rashee Rice, Justin Ross at 6'4", 210, and Justin Watson at 6'2", 215 on the field. These are all the stuff that has to be broken down in camp. So in general, with Rashee Rice, 73 overall, I have him at wide receiver 35. He's going 34 on Fantasy Pros. I think that's relatively like within the range of outcome, or relatively appropriately valued, I should actually say, at 73 overall, because he probably only has wide receiver 2 as the top end of his range of outcomes now. And he also has bust built into him at 73. They have Hollywood Brown at 79. I think this is okay. This is hedging the bet towards something going on with Rashee Rice. I think he's slightly overvalued. I have Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy at wide receiver 47 combined, until we can figure out like who's the 2, who's the 3, who's going to be in the wide receiver 2 sets going on. So if Hollywood Brown is the number 1 wide receiver in real life, not in fantasy, because something goes on with Rashee Rice, I do think that this would be the range that I would be really considering pulling the trigger on him. On ESPN, and I think it's because they haven't factored in any type of legal action, because it hasn't happened yet. They're going at 105 and 106, 45 and 47. This is more in line with where I think that they're both valued at. And in this case, outside of trying to throw like darts at getting like the number two attached to Patrick Mahomes, like I don't know how they win you a league. Wide receiver threes tend to grow on trees. On fantasy pros, you have Xavier Worthy going at 92, uh, wide receiver 42. And again, I don't necessarily like love this range. There's guys like Polk and Baker from New England that I think have a better chance to win me a league than trying to throw a dart at Xavier Worthy at pick 92 or even at like 104, 106. One of the things that I can maybe, if I'm functioning today, there's going to be guys that like a Puka last year that I can really feel like I can throw that dart at late in the draft and feel better about potentially landing that guy in this range. The other thing is, and I was looking at this ahead of time, your Lad McConkey, and of course I'm gonna champion Lad McConkey all day. If he's going in about this range of your draft, I would be much rather pulling the trigger on Lad McConkey 48 overall as a chance to win a league than Worthy or Brown. And even with like Rome at pick 46 going to the Bears, expecting that there's possibility that he could just take over that Bears wide receiver room in a way that like the imperfect Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy can't. I like Xavier Worthy more to help Patrick Mahomes out than I like him from a fantasy perspective this year. All right, tight end room overall. I have Travis Kelce, tight end 4. Father Time is undefeated. He's going to be 35 this year. The biggest thing that I would look at with Travis Kelce is um, him getting older does not affect his ability to understand football and sit down in zone coverage. Where it's going to hurt him is his ability to find separation against man and the yak once he catches the football. Those are the two things that are going to hurt him. So his last year, 93 receptions, 984 yards, 5 touchdowns, expecting positive regression in the touchdown. So I probably would put that closer to 10 and then maybe 1,100 yards receiving as the over underline for Travis Kelce. The problem with that is now, and I can pull this up, is now Travis Kelce is not going to have an elite or he may have an elite season in his range of outcomes. You're not buying the ability to have that legendary type of outcome for Travis Kelce. That's what I would end up looking at him from the value that I'm going to be putting into him. So at pick 28 overall, tight end 2, right there with Sam Laporta. This year it looks like punt the meta at quarterback and tight end. I can go get, of course, my Dalton Kincaid shares later on in the draft. That's what I would be looking at with him, or David Njoku, that theoretically have the same type of high end range of outcomes. He may be slightly safer than gambling at some of the other picks, but the other thing that I would look at with the Chiefs is between Noah Gray, that they have run as their tight end before in the past. They do like him. And then Travis Wiley or Jared Wiley, the 4th round pick. I could definitely see them trying to keep some of the wear and tear off of old man Kelce. And that's just going to eat into some of that slight opportunity. So he's probably still going to get the red zone work. He just may not get that ugly 20 to 20 stuff that generally has less value, the less efficient routes, because they're just going to take him off field. They're not going to have him pass block. They're not going to have him run block. They just may use him best what he's use him for what he's best at this point and have him available for the playoff run. I could definitely see that occurring. Stuff that I would be trying to stay away from. On ESPN, again, 28 overall, tight end 2. I'm going to go a different direction. Fantasy Pros, he's going relatively the same area. And I just think there's better tight ends that have less uncertainty with the age, in better positions to potentially lead their team in targets than Travis Kelce does. Like, I'm not chasing last year's production. I'm chasing this year's range of outcomes, and I definitely think he can burn you. So I think that's about all I have for the Chiefs, and I will be coming back tomorrow with the Colts.